Let's talk about digital connections. And I'm not talking social media. Come back after the titles and find out what I am talking about. Hey everybody, Anthony Dodge, Maltrain Outsider, the Märklin Outsider, a Night of the Round Boy Table, here with a video that just came out of the blue. So anyhow, I want to talk a little bit about pen couplers and why, after messing around with my new Märklin Desiro, you can see the Modellbahn Unio Desiro down here. I'm going to talk about a little bit about digital pin couplers in case you're not familiar with it. And also, I don't want to say compare, but show you some of the different ones. There are many different styles out there, but I'm showing the 4 most common ones that I come across, including the new Märklin version, which maybe isn't that common yet, but the style is. All right, so let's get into talk about those pin couplers and start with the first ones I got to know, which was on the very first train I ever bought, an ICE3. But what I'm going to show you for the ICE3 is also true on the ICE4. So let me set that up. Here is the standard Märklin digital pin coupler. And this really is a great one to show just immediately what we're talking about. You have a, in this case, 5-pin socket. And I will point these things out. You have a 5-pin socket, you have the socket housing, and then there's usually some sort of coupling housing to hold the socket in place. And then usually you'll have some kind of guide aperture, whether it's guide arms or clips and guide bars, to put it all together. You also will get I call it a spatula. It's just basically a joiner and coupler and uncoupler, because you can use this on many things and just pry up to uncouple your standard couplings. But this is meant to go on the track to create a level surface at NEM coupling height to make sure the male to the female sockets connect straight in. You can do it without it, but you run the risk of bending, breaking, missing, because there's always a little bit of play in that you can damage the bars. All right, so that is the male housing, and then there's the female. And you can see here you have the socket receptacle, and it's in its own housing. But then around the housing, you will notice that there is a thick U-shaped additional housing that creates good protection and stability for the socket housing. Nothing on top, but this is early form. They've been doing these couplers like this for their ICE3s and ICE4s. Now, why digital couplers? Maybe I should have talked about that ahead of time. These things do a lot. They have a lot more signal and control in them than it's one thing to have a locomotive all in-house with 32 digital functions, but these things have their lighting, various sound functions, various control functions, steering, blah, blah, blah. There's so many things in these, and that's a lot of signals. And to make sure end-to-end is reading correctly, because you have to have 2 ends, and with Märklin, they each have to have the ski to complete the circuit and the signal. And the third rail pickup, of course. So digital coupling just makes sense. Anyhow, so a fairly solid design. Also, on this picture might be better to point out than the following picture. If you look to the right of this picture, you'll see the little guide bar that's going to fit into the clips in the previous picture. Well, 2 pictures back. But I'll show you a better view of that right now. So right there. So that guide bar is going to fit into that little vertical clip or horizontal clip. I think of it as vertical because to me horizontal is that way, flat. This one's on its side. But the guide bars on each end of the socket catch onto that, and then once it catches on to make sure they're connecting, Then the guide bar goes into the narrow part, which almost guarantees pretty much a straight on pin sliding into socket. But you really want to do this because there is a little bit of up and down play in the NEM couplers and the arms that come out, the kinematics that come down. So you really want to use one of these, and I'll show you in a second what happens. So there's the guide arms again. I'll just point them out, and those slide into those little clips, and then the clips do clip over a little bump on that guide bar later on, which you can kind of see there. But yeah, so there it is. You just set the one side up and slide the other side in, and the little spatula, the rail guide, coupler guide, just keeps them at the exact same level because they're designed to be level. And if you do that, then they go straight in. If you do it without that, there's a possibility there could be a little sag, and when you try to push them in, you're going to actually bend the pins. And if you bend a pin, or worse, break it off, you're screwed. All right, so that is the standard IC3 and IC4, although the newer IC4s actually now have, I think, a 10-pin coupler instead of 5. But it's the same exact format, which is good. I like it. It's fine, but there is better. So there you can see how there's the little guide arm that will go into that and keep it all, and then the green is pointing out the bit. All right. What is better? In fact, maybe I should save this to last, but this is Roco, and this is their Railjet connections. Now, Roco has a slightly different connection for some of their multiple units, their EMUs and DMUs, but overall, it tends to be kind of the same. And I'm going to go right into why I think Roco's is the best. On the side of this, even before I go looking at the sockets, on the side of this, you have 2 guide arms. They are, and the key is look how far extended they are beyond the needle points. The needle points, the pin points. They're way extended beyond that. And so then on top of it, just like the Märklin, except on the top and bottom instead of on the sides, you have that little clip again. So there is the female socket. And so here you can see it's actually a 4-pin connector by Roco. But if you look on the left and right, built into the housing, first of all, now that we're looking straight on at this, look at the thickness of the housing around the socket. There is the socket itself, which is very thick, its own little module. But then the shell, the NEM coupling shell, the housing for that is very thick. And you've got 2 guide holes that those arms, long before those pins come close to the sockets, levels this off and puts it in. I mean, you still might want to use the spatula, but this really almost guarantees a straight in shot, even if you don't have the spatula. In fact, I don't have a Roco spatula. I don't know if I got one originally and I lost it, but I've got like 4 or 5 of these from Märklin, and I've got this one from Modellbahn Unio. And I've got one from Brawa, which is the same as the one from Modellbahn Unio. Okay. So anyhow, yeah, and then you could see the guide arms go in there, and then the clips go into the little spaces set aside by the yellow. It's a nice thick box protecting the socket segment. And it's full of protective redundancy. It protects the socket connection. The socket is going to connect flush. You know, the pins are going to go into the socket, and then the 2 arms are going to sit flush. But the clips over and above and the guide arms on the side are going to create a very protective and sturdy, as well as strong, because those clips that go on the top, just like on Märklin, are what's going to feel the pressure from the pull That is your actual coupler there. Everything else is about lining up the pins so that they go into the sockets without breaking them, because these are very small. I'm showing you in large pictures, but these are needle-sized pins and sockets. All right, so when you look from above, look how far those arms extend past the pins, the pin points. Just look how far those pins extend. So when you put your thing down, and I always use it, those two arms are going to level you as you slide them together. So if you look at that, it's about a 99% certainty that even without the little spatula, the coupler guide, the rail guide, that these are going to house perfectly. And then nice thick clips on top and bottom to handle the force of the pull. So just to me, this is the best design. There's just so much redundancy to protect side-to-side play, up and down play, and guarantee a good pin connection without risking damaging the pins. The Märklin is not bad, but this just has so much redundancy built in. The housing for both the sockets, it's great. I just really like this a lot. All right, so now I'm going to look at the digital pin couplers for my, this is, you can't really see it here, this is my Brawa Vario. Now Vario, and then of course I've got two Desiros here. A Vario is just double deckers, including the cabs on each end, where the Desiro has a single level for the cabs. Let's focus on this. Again, the white is pointing out how thick the housing is to support the socket element, or in this case, the pin element. But it's the same on the other side. Okay, and when I flip the picture, that is just a very thick housing. That's good. It just means those circuits inside are protected stronger, less likely to break or crack or do that. It's one solid piece. That's also very important. So let's point out the other elements on it, and you'll see a lot of arrows pop up. All right, so red, we've got a 6-pin connector here. So the Märklin was 5, the Roco was 4, and the Brawa is 6. The yellow points out all the protruding guide arms. So it has 3 of them. Not 4, it has 3 of them. There's a guide arm on the top, there's a guide arm on the one side, and there's a guide arm on the bottom. The green points out the holes for the guide arms. Now, curiously enough, the guide arm on the bottom does not have a reciprocal hole. It's just going to fit under the guide arm on the other side. So you'll notice this guide arm, there's a little gap above it. So the guide arm on the female side slides in, and it creates a double brace for the bottom. So you then have a clip. So it's not quite the mirror. The guide arm on the right and the left are your clips. The orange is pointing to, it's actually a guide arm similar to what Märklin had on the side of theirs. So they're 2 totally different designs here. All right, I apologize, this picture isn't in great shape. Here's the female side. Again, you see a guide arm at the top and a socket next to it for the reciprocating guide arm. And then there is, on the bottom, there is a guide arm that will go straight in above the guide arm on the bottom from the male side. On this side, the orange is pointing to a guide arm that will go on and then lock behind the guide arm on the other side. And then you have another in yellow, you have the guide arms and the sockets for the guide arms are shown in green on the other way. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting bits here. And here you can see those guide arms on the female side. Here you see it on the male side. So here's where I'll give my criticism of Brawa. The guide arms, unlike the Roco, even though they've got a lot of guide arms, so there's a lot of redundancy in this, the guide arms really don't start connecting into their slots and stabilizing things until the pins are starting to connect as well. That's why I like the Roco. The guide arms already stabilize everything, so then it's just a straight shot to connect them. This one is still allowing for play, so you definitely want to use your little joiner spatula, rail leveler, and again, guide them over that way, because there isn't a lot of room to slide them in. It's pretty much, you start connecting it all at one time. Now, the other drawback is that although there is, like the Märklin IC3, there is a click on two sides, there's no clamp. It really is just a couple of little protruding pieces of plastic that go past each other and then catch. But I think if you were to constantly connect and reconnect over time, those would wear out. So I don't think it has the best, and anybody who's watched my live stream knows there have been a couple of times where it will just suddenly pull apart, because you really have to click those in and really make sure they click to hold. But even then, a bump or something like that, they can undo. So this is not the best design. It's good. The redundancy design is brilliant in concept, but they need to have a better clicking device. Notice it's never about the digital side, it's the plastic side, and how are you going to get the two sides to join, and how are you going to hold them together under the duress of being pulled. All right, so now we're going to talk about the third one. That's this one back here. This is the Modellbahn Unio Desiro, which means it is a single-decker cab on each end and double-decker coaches in the middle. So the first thing I want to point out is this one is a 14-pin connector. It's got a lot of sound and light functions, all kind of things. The different boards light up, the driver's dashboard lights up. There's so many commands going through. So again, digital just makes more sense. Otherwise, you would have to add so much more that the standard coupler contacts that you have to do in 3-rail, even the current conducting ones, it would be a lot to send through. So anyhow, 14 pins, because there's just a lot of functions on this, like 35, 36, plus a bunch of additional sound functions on one function. All right, now, the yellow is pointing to the clips, okay? So similar to the Roco, the clips are on the top and bottom. And again, that's what holds it together for the pulling. The clips, you can see, are thick, maybe a little thicker than the Roco and the Märklin earlier on. And then here's what I want to point out, both pro and con. Again, your circuit is in there, your pin array is in there, but it doesn't have its own little housing. You can see even to the back, it's just wiring straight up to the little pin bar, and then there's a little bar in there that is held in place by slots on the plastic. If you follow the white arrow, you can see that the housing actually comes in two parts, because what happens is they fit the circuit that holds the pin connectors into that housing, and then they put the bottom on, or they fit it into the bottom. And so the pin connectors are on a thick bar, but then there's just wiring and circuitry behind it. It's not in its own housing. It's braced into the thick housing around it. So unlike that Roco or even the Brawa that has the thick housing holding the pin and the receptacle in place, and then the thicker coupling mount, the NEM coupling mount over it, to really give you a strong redundancy. This one, there's seams there. And seams over time, as you use it more and more, those will get weaker. So this is not nearly, I don't know if it's a better or worse design than the Brawa. It's thicker coupling than the Brawa, and it definitely is clips, so it's going to handle the force of the pull, the drag weight better than the Brawa. And I do like the thicker outer housing. I just wish it had that thicker inner housing as well. It would just protect those pins a little better. However, now that I've made that complaint, I'm going to show you where they're already telling me stick my complaint in the garbage can. What you can't see in this is that the pins are actually reseated into that housing. They're not flush on the housing like they are on every other one. They provide the protection for those pins differently. So if you look at this, that's what I'm going to point. You'll notice the pins are sticking out, but that the housing is actually open and has room in there. And that's what the white arrow is pointing at, that the pin bar and everything is reseated into the coupler. And that's because there's the female bit, and notice that it sticks out. Notice with the white arrow, the female actually sticks out beyond the housing. So that's going to slide into the housing. So actually it gives it an even sturdier, because unlike all the other three where it's the housing for the coupler and the housing for the receptacle are right here, and then you have little clips above them. You have one fitting in like a socket over the other, and then you have the clips above and below. So it's up and down protection for those pins is actually somewhat stronger. The other thing that these guys, I got to give them credit for, and again, I still think this design could be stronger, but the way they're doing it, okay. But what I do like here is that where Brawa, the clips are just, they clip on. Okay, there's just a clip. But Brawa has these thin little arms that go into the slots, and they're thin. This takes thick clips, top and bottom. But here's where I really want to give Modellbahn Unio some real credit here. Look carefully, and I'll try to zoom in on this. Look carefully. The sides where the clip goes in are angled. The clip is angled. The clip tongue is angled. When the clips go in there, they're not only going in there and clipping in, they're being held down by that angle. They're wedged in there, which creates another very strong top and bottom protection. So if some grandchild or somebody who's not really familiar with trade says, hey, let me check this out, and they grab it, there's a lot more protection on those pins than you see. This is redundancy, and you like to see redundancy. This is a brilliant design overall. I'm not mad about the lack of some stronger housing for especially the pin array, but they're definitely protecting the pins this way. Because going through the seam, you have the coupler coming one way, the seam between the two arrays is no longer right in the middle. It's covered within the thick housing on the other side. It's well done overall. It's different, but I really like this, and that's going to come into a factor with the next train we're going to look at. So here you can see the two getting ready to go together. Again, use the little spatula. They have their own brand here. The clips do extend beyond the needles well enough that it does act kind of like a guide arm, because that's one thing, it has no guide arms. So the pins extend a little bit further than they do on the Brawa. But they're acting as stabilizer. Again, that creates a little bit of play until you get it together. Once it's together, it's protected. Putting it together, you better use the spatula. That's what I call it. But at least the clips are longer, that they kind of start getting into the receptacle before the pins start trying to get into their receptacles. So it's got an element of the guide arm, but I'd like to see it better. Again, it's just why I think Roco is the best overall. All right, so let's talk about Märklin. Now I'm starting with the female side here, and I want to show you all the things, pros and cons. All right, take the red arrow. We're looking at the female. You can see this is going to be a 12-pin connector. So the Modellbahn Unio was 14. This is 10. So you know, in the same space where you have a 4-pin or a 5-pin connector, these pins are skinnier. So you really got to protect these pins because there's a lot of pins, and you got to protect them or your functions aren't going to work. Very strong, secure following the red bar. Very strong, secure housing for both the pins on the other end, but on this particular coupler, the female side, you can see it's a very thick, nice housing. And then just a couple of white lines pointing out, again, a very thick housing. I like that thickness. That is as good or better than Roco in terms, or even Brawa, in terms of the thickness around. Other than you have two issues that I point out. Number one, you've cut way deep into those for your clips. Nice, fat, strong clips, strong support as the train's being pulled around. That's great. Or EMU is being pulled around. That's great. But it also weakens the strength sandwich in, because they did not do what Modellbahn Unio did. If they did here what Modellbahn Unio, I would have no complaints with this design overall. Unfortunately, their clips, like the Roco clips earlier on, like the Brawa clips, they're not wedged in. Modellbahn Unio came up with the clever idea of cutting at angles, so when things go in, they're held into place, they're held down. It also acts as guide bar leverage, which is wonderful. So while this is very thick, which makes for sturdy, strong pulling grip, the plastic's not going to wear out anytime soon. It's got the issue that technically things could pop and pull off. You know, there's nothing holding top and bottom in except each other. And that's why, again, I like the Roco redundancy with the guide arms and the Modellbahn Unio with the wedge shapes for the clips. All right, let's look at the male side. All right, so here's the male side. So you got the very sturdy, thick clips up above. And again, the same thing with the housing. You just have the seams, which means this is two separate pieces of plastic. Seams can break over time, under pressure, under duress. So if somebody picks it up, the weight of the car in front of it could conceivably cause that to split, which would open up the pins for damage. I would rather see this as a single housing the way Brawa did, or Roco, where it's a single housing. But again, good thick housing for the pin array itself. Now, you will see not as well done as Modellbahn Unio, but still there. You'll notice that the female is, on the Modellbahn Unio, the female extended quite far and the male was receded. Here, the male extends out a bit and the female is receded a bit, and they'll fit over those clips. So it does provide way, I'm sure their engineers are like, okay, this is what we can do, and it will still protect the seam between the two to keep them from bending and potentially bending the pins. So there's just a little bit of protection there to protect the pin array at the seam. Not as much. I would like to see, if you're going to have that recessed, recess it like Modellbahn Unio did. All right, so there again, I'm just pointing out the thickness, but the seams. It's a nice design. Unfortunately, there's one other issue with it. And that's the little tool you have to use because they have a new design tool for it. So let me go back here and explain my mild concern. I mentioned it in the first impressions video. This has something that makes me nervous, and I shouldn't be. Okay, I've run it. It's great. The problem had nothing to do with the pin connectors. It was a ski issue. It wasn't in properly. I put it in properly. Everything worked, and it runs like a dream now. But I do have a concern long term about how they did the pin couplers. Because while they have redundancy, they did the minimal. And here's the other thing. There are really no guide arms. Although, and if I go back to the picture of the male here, I didn't get it over the top, but you can kind of see this. The clip does not extend very far. It does extend. It extends farther than the Brawa, but not as far as Modellbahn, Unio, or Roco. The clips don't extend beyond the needles very far. The pins, sorry. When you go to put this together, you better use this. And this actually sits a little higher, and it's obviously narrower, but it sits a little higher on the rail because these couplers are a little bit different. And you better use it to put them together because there's no guide arm. And worse, because of how thick the clips are. Thick clips is great. It means it's really going to endure a lot of running and pulling, especially if you're going up inclines. It's a great design. But because of the absence of guide arms, you're left with an insecurity. Now, I'm sure a few guys from Germany or whoever have got this are going to say, I didn't have any problems. I'm not right. I don't know what you're talking about. The first time I went to put this together, these clips were a pain in the butt. They were stiff, they were thick, and as I'm trying to put it together, I'm getting resistance. And I thought the pins aren't aligned properly, and oops, I'm going to break them. Even using the guide, I felt like they were not going in. And so when I finally did click them and get them together and then put them on and had the problem with my Central Station 3, my first thought wasn't, oh, the decoder's blown. It's like, oh, I damaged the pins putting it together and the signal's not going through. That's why I got reading the decoder and then it froze. No, it was actually the problem was the ski wasn't making full contact, so the circuit wasn't being complete. So it was recognizing there was a decoder there, but it couldn't complete the circuit and commands to read it. Once I fixed the ski, it all worked just fine and everything read. But that was very harrowing. And of course, I had it down here for the programming track, and then I've got to go up to the main track to run it in and test it and everything else. And that meant I had to take the cars apart again. And then I had to put them back together. And again, it was a challenge. Now, I have taken it apart and put it back together for this video. And I will say, I have gotten much more at ease with it. I've got it figured out. And now I click it together about as easily as I click anything else. But at that early stages, because of how thick those clips are and rigid they are, I was scared that I was breaking the pins trying to put it together, because you really did have to force it together the first couple times. Now they click in. Now they work, but boy, that first couple of times, and this is why they say, don't take these apart, clip them together, take them apart, clip them together, because you risk damaging the pins and you risk wearing out the little plastic housing and clips, snapping them off, breaking them. And if you do, they don't just sell a spare car. It has to be repaired. So that is the complaint I have with this particular Märklin system. It doesn't have a lot of redundancy the way the Roco does. And while the housing is very thick, very sturdy, I know those pins are safe because of how thick the housing is. It's not as assuring as Modellbahn Union's setup, or the Roco with the extra guide arms that not only help guide the pins into their sockets dead eye, but also protects the seam from up and down play, because those long arms go through and hold the two arrays together and protects the seams from any up and down play, or again, somebody picking it up and bending it at the juncture there. So I would just like to have seen Märklin either spend a little extra time on design and put side guide bars in, or some sort of additional guide, because again, it is so scary. Once you get the hang of it, then I guess the fear goes away. But yeah, for this video, to take pictures of this, I had to take a couple of cars apart. There is that moment of nerves, but now I'm doing it where, okay, I got this. Click, and it's going in. I'm not as scared to use a little bit more force, because normally you want to push carefully, because if you don't have them aligned and you push hard, that's when you bend and break the pins. All right, so let's come back to a wrap up. Okay, so that was my look at the digital pin couplings. There are many other systems. For example, Pico, their ICEs, their digital ICEs, use the exact, and I mean the exact same coupling system as Märklin. I have been told by several people you can actually take a Pico car and stick it into a Märklin array if you wanted, and it'll work. The EMUs and DMUs from Pico have slightly different pin arrays and couplings than what I've shown here, but it's similar to their brand. So now the Pico ones have a multi-lock and clip system, because again, once you put their multiple units together, you are not supposed to take them apart. So it's a little more work to take them apart. Anyhow, those coupler systems. But this gives you a general idea both what the couplers are, but also the concern I have with the latest design by Märklin. Again, it's not a bad design. To me, it's just could have been better. And it takes some of the best, but also some of the question marks from other ones. And this is the first multiple unit like this that I have seen Märklin make in my time in the hobby. And this is different. You know, they clearly did not use their standard array system that they use for the IC3s and the IC4s. It's a new design to me from Märklin. And it's got pros and it's got cons. When I look at the Roco, I don't know that I see too many cons. It may be no cons, really. Now, yeah, it would be cool if they could also do the recessed, where the male is extended beyond the housing and the female is recessed, and it just gives that little extra double shell protection of this, of where the two come together. It's not right over where the pins are in their sockets like everybody else's. That's where I give Modellbahn Union credit. Their redundancy system is very nicely protected. The problem is they did not get, with that redundancy issue, they did not give themselves long enough guides. And to me, you need both. You should have good guide arms so that you can start to put these together And then having one of these is necessary, but with the Roco, it almost, you can get away without it. The other ones, I wouldn't trust it. I do it with Roco anyhow to be safe, but there's a reason I assume that I didn't get one of these in either of my Railjet sets. Whereas this is standard in your ICEs and the Brawa and Modellbahn Unio, as well as the new Märklin little bit. So there's something to be said there. But anyhow, if you didn't know what I was talking about when I said digital pin couplers, there you saw some examples. The old standby from Märklin, the one Brawa system I have, the Modellbahn Unio system, and then the new Märklin connectors. And of them, Brawa is probably the weakest. But again, there are so many pros to the Brawa. It's not like one's bad. It's just you'd like to see somebody be like Roco and just cover all the bases that way. So there it is. 40 minutes or more of randomly explaining some stupid stuff. So I hope you stayed to the end here and liked what you saw, but it is what it is. Until my next video, I'm going to say Auf Wiedersehen, tschüss, and happy trains. Take care, everybody.